Away from our shores, let's tell you about the peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. There was one, and this is the first direct interaction since both nations went to war, which yielded a deal to swap 1,000 prisoners of war on each side. Both nations will now resume talks after they have each set out vision for a future ceasefire. But coming out of the highly anticipated talks in Istanbul, which lasted just more than 90 minutes, there were few signs of more significant progress towards ending the three-year war. Kyiv was seeking an unconditional ceasefire to pause a conflict that has destroyed large swathes of Ukraine and displaced millions of people. Moscow has consistently rebuffed those calls, and the only concrete agreement appeared to be a deal to exchange 1,000 prisoners each. To discuss this, I'm joined by Alexander von Rugen. Some perspective on this dialogue and what it means for the future. The first direct talks since this war began with this deal. What would be your assessment of this first interaction? Successful or a stalemate?
Well, I think it was a lack of respect. Putin apparently didn't want to show up. He sent non-decision makers to the meeting. The only decision they seem to have been able to make is on a prison swap, which are not uncommon in conflict situations. Zelensky chose not to come because he was intimidated and didn't want to be humiliated by being left standing at the altar by himself. Of course, this is the first scheduled meeting. It did take place. It was with the Ministry of Defense from Ukraine and three representatives from Russia, which, like as I said earlier, are non-decision makers. It hopefully will set the tone to move further, but I think Russia's concessions and their demands are being heard through European partners of the Ukraine, saying they're unreasonable. Since 2014, at the initial invasion, Russia had invaded the Crimea and Luhansk area of Russia. In 2022, they invaded Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. One of their conditions for a ceasefire is that the Ukrainians move their troops out of these desired annexed areas, which is completely unreasonable in the eyes of the Ukrainians. So Europe is now looking at massive sanctions to apply to Russia in addition to the sanctions.
I mean, some would argue that the sanctions doesn't seem to be getting the right reaction. But let's stay with the talks. Going into the peace talk, the Ukrainian president had accused Russia of being unserious about making peace. His statement was premised on the caliber of delegation that Putin sent to Istanbul. How correct was his submission, considering that he also sent a representative, though he's defense minister?
Well, the defense minister certainly had a louder voice than the representatives from Russia. They couldn't even answer the question as to whether or not they were going to accept a ceasefire. They said they'll consider it. They had to report back to the boss. So I think until there's an actual meeting between the two leaders, Zelensky and Putin, we're not, we're going to edge towards progress. But it's also important to note, Russia recently had the May Day parade on the 10th in Russia, which is a celebration of the victory of the Second World War. And to concede or to give in or give the appearances of giving in during that time where they were hosting many other nations. By the way, all European nations boycotted attendance of that parade with the exception of Serbia and Slovakia. Pardon me. I think it will play out in the next few weeks. I'm sure Mr. Trump's input will also be important.
Well, what should we expect in the coming days after this first round of talks? I mean, there's talk about the potential of the president's meeting, but a lot of persons don't see that happening.
Well, as I said, it'll play out. I think if Mr. Trump interferes or gives his opinions, as he's certainly been very verbal in the past, it will have an effect. But until they agree to meet, and again, it's also important to note this was the first meeting in 3 years, so it was kind of a half-mast meeting. If it becomes a war of attrition now, to see how much either side is going to give in, I think that's part of the negotiation tactic.
All right, the prisoners swap deal. Quickly talk to us about the implications you see from this deal for the prospect, of ending the conflict for future diplomatic efforts. In fact,
it's certainly a good sign. It's better than no prisoner swap, and it shows a willingness to compromise a little bit. But it's a normal situation in war. Prisoner swaps are not restricted to this war. They're very common.
All right, Alexander, I'll have to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
My pleasure.